So during my free time, when I'm not working on YouTube, I'm playing Baldur's Gate 3. And if I'm not working on YouTube or playing Baldur's Gate 3, I'm thinking about when my next opportunity to play Baldur's Gate 3 is gonna be. You know where I'm going with this, but I guess spoilers for the game if you haven't played it before. But Baldur's Gate 3 did something really interesting with the character of Astarion. He's more than just the romance option for the people who always end up with toxic boyfriends. He's also a vampire. And after playing for 300 hours, the next time you go to make a D&D character, you might just want to make that character a vampire. Which is fine. Most people building their first D&D characters are looking at a character in media that they like and just trying to replicate that into the game. But playing a vampire isn't as easy in Dungeons & Dragons as it is in Baldur's Gate 3. If you open up your player's handbook, you're going to see that there is no place to put a character option for vampire in there. In fact, vampirism isn't even mentioned in the player's handbook once. So the question is, if I want to play a vampire, how do I do it? Well, it is possible for a player character to become a vampire. However, it isn't a player character creation option. It is hidden as a DM option in the monster manual. In the player characters as vampires section of the monster manual, it tells us that if a player character turns into a vampire spawn or a vampire, their strength, dex, and con all become 18. In addition, you gain your vampire's resistances, so if you're a vampire spawn, you're going to become resistant to necrotic, bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from non-magical attacks. You also gain their attacks, like their bite attack or their claw attack, but you also gain regeneration, spider climb, and a whole bunch more. The only downsides to being a vampire is you can't enter a house without permission, you can't enter running water, so say goodbye to rivers, you can't take a stake to the heart, however, most people can't, so that shouldn't be a huge deal. And you also take 20 radiant damage if you step into the sun. Also, your character becomes lawful evil, and your DM can just decide to take control of them if they want you, forcing you to re-roll a new character. If you want your character back, your party will have to reverse the vampirism, which can only be done with either a wish spell or killing you and bringing you back, which just requires a 300 gold piece diamond and some elbow grease. Now, if you end up going through the book yourself, you might be a little bit confused. And by that, I mean I'm stupid and I misread it, and if you do the same thing, I don't want you to fall for it. How the vampire section reads is, the game statistics of a player character transformed into a vampire spawn and then a vampire don't change except blah 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 blah. And I thought that was specifically talking about the player character as a vampire and not referencing a vampire spawn. However, there was an article I read on D&D Beyond as I was trying to figure out what the statistics would be for a vampire spawn, and it seems pretty clear that this applies to both being a vampire or a vampire spawn. I don't know, to me it reads as pretty ambiguous, because vampire spawn, first of all, only have 16 strength, dex, and con, and are also neutral evil, not lawful evil, so it reads like it applies to only the vampire, who have an 18 in those stats and are lawful evil. However, I showed this to a friend, and they immediately told me, oh, you know, as a vampire spawn, you'd have an 18 in those stats, lawful evil. And then we had a bit of an argument about, well, it doesn't apply. They told me I was stupid, and I probably am, so I'm gonna move on. If I feel like I'm wasting your time, well, I wasted 15 minutes of my time researching it, so live with it. Either way, if you want to become a vampire spawn, you have to first be bitten by a true vampire, then die, be buried in the ground, and wait a day or so, and then you will come back as a spawn of that original vampire. And that's assuming you can find one. You're gonna have to ask your DM if they can include vampires in their campaign. Maybe vampires don't fit for the current setting, or maybe they're simply too powerful for what your party is currently available to face. And secondly, if your DM realizes that you want to face vampires because you want to try to become a vampire yourself, it is very likely they'll say no. And even if they don't say no, they might allow it and then take control of your character, forcing you to re-roll a new one. So there's a lot of risks that you're taking if you're trying to be a vampire. But let's say your DM is cool. Let's say your DM allows you to become a spawn and says that they're not going to take control of your character character, unless you're very clearly not playing into your alignment, and you get bitten by that vampire and die. Okay, great, you're a vampire, all is good. Well, there are a lot of problems that you have just caused, not just with your character, but with the game itself, possibly just making it no longer fun until you can reverse your vampirism or until you eventually die. A lot of adventures and campaigns are simply downright impossible to do if one of the players are a vampire. There's more opportunity if the entire party are vampires. However, there's still going to be issues there, and well, let's talk about it. First of all, you are very, very overpowered. With an 18 in strength, dex, and con, you are going to be so incredibly bulky compared to the rest of your party. You can play a crazy strong barbarian with an 18 in unarmored defense, and even if you don't, your character is going to be quite bulky, even if you're playing a wizard. You're going to have resistance to the most common damage types other than fire. On top of that, you regain 10 hit points every turn. What's really busted about regeneration is that if you're in the middle of a dungeon and get knocked down to 1 hit point, well, you just have to stand around for a couple minutes and you'll be back to full health, good as new. In fact, if you're playing a martial class, like a fighter who doesn't really have a lot of abilities that refresh on long rest or short rest, you basically can just keep on fighting forever. And in the same ways playing a vampire is too powerful, it's also way too weak. And by that I mean a lot of the debuffs that you get are so brutal that they effectively prevent you from playing the game and are going to cause a constant hindrance on not only as you the player, but also on the dungeon master trying to run a game. Firstly, you can't enter a building without being invited in. Any stealth mission where you need to sneak into a castle or something like that, well, too bad, you can't do that. Oh, you just want to go shopping at night? Oh, well, you can't do that either. You have to hope that someone's there to invite you in. And how often ever has a shopkeeper invited someone into their store? You're gonna have to wait around as the party go in and buy your stuff for you, which you're probably gonna have to do anyways if that shop is only open in the day. Because remember, you take 20 radiant damage when you're in the sun. I've played in multiple campaigns where 90% of the game is taking place during the day. If you had a vampire character in those adventures, you just couldn't play. You just would not be in the game ever. An umbrella or a dark cloak isn't going to cut it. 20 damage a turn is enough to kill off a lot of early level characters in one turn, and even a lot of higher level characters only take a minute or two before you're just dead. Now, your DM is unlikely to let you be a vampire at level 1, but still. Also, I hope the city that you're staying in is cool with you being a vampire, because you're gonna have to really try to hide that, and once you get found out, well, I hope there wasn't a mission that was particularly tied to what you're doing in this city, because there's no way you're getting in again, and they're probably burning down any place you've ever stayed before. Now, playing a game where you have to hide what your true identity is from everyone around you, that could be a lot of fun. However, that also just causes a lot of headaches for your DM in trying to make sure that no one around your player is going to be suspicious of you. The fact that you can't just enter buildings and you can't go outside during the day means that you're basically crippling the DM's ability to create what they want for their game. Everything they do, they're going to have to consider whether you can get in there and whether or not you're able to leave the house because of the time of day it is. There's certain adventure books where if you added a vampire to them where there wasn't originally a vampire, you would just flat out die very early on, if not right away in some instances. Now, I will say, if you have a party that's all vampires, or maybe a mix of vampires and werewolves, you can make that work. However, if you have one person in the party who's afflicted with vampirism, you are either going to have to set huge things around making sure that they can still be part of the game, or you have to be very quick about trying to find a way to cure the vampirism. So, is being a vampire in D&D impossible? No, not at all. Is being a vampire something you'd want to be long term? Not really. But maybe that answer isn't good enough for you. Maybe you accept that vampirism, the way it's written in the monster manual, is really frustrating and not fun to play. However, you still want to play your vampire character. Well, there are some ways around it that we can make it work. Now, if we go back to the article by Kyle Shire, he suggests that if you want to play a vampire in a long-term campaign, you should play a Dhampir, which, to be fair, is actually a pretty good idea. Dhampir are a playable race in D&D, meant to be played, play-tested to be played in long-term games. You'll still be able to have your craving for blood, and you'll have similar abilities to a vampire. However, you will be able to enter homes, go outside, and swim through rivers. But maybe that's not what you want. Maybe instead what you want is a story of someone trying to cure themselves of vampirism, which the Dhampir don't really get. I mean, you could homebrew it to make it work that way. However, the Dhampir is supposed to be a playable race. It's not an affliction like vampirism is. Well, if that's the story you want, you might want to consider if you want to be playing the vampire, or you just want to be telling the story of curing vampirism. Because in that case, you can have a character who isn't a vampire, but has an NPC close to them who is, who the player character is trying to cure. That way you can be searching for that cure for vampirism, as well as having to worry about people finding out whether or not they're a vampire and trying to protect them. However, you can also leave them in a home or a cave while you go explore around in dungeons, because they aren't a player character and you don't have to worry about how much fun they're having. If you have any other suggestions about how you can work vampirism into your D&D character, please feel free to leave it in the comments. I love seeing what you guys have to say. Thank you for watching. If you like this video and you want to see more like it, click that subscribe button to stay updated on future releases. Thank you again, and this is the end of the video.